recording now. So thank you everyone for joining, and I'd like to begin by saying that there are just a few special rules for this session. Of course, if there are any issues, this session will be governed by KOTESOL's Code of Conduct, and we encourage everyone to keep their video cameras on, to keep a warm and friendly atmosphere during the session, and also reminding everyone there will be an Easter egg movie title, so keep an eye out for that, especially in the chat. And yeah, I'll now introduce the speaker for today. Adrienne has been teaching English for 11 years, specializing in teacher professional development for 3 years. Her area of research is in graphic novels and reading strategies. She's currently working in Uzbekistan as an English language fellow. Thank you very much for your time, Adrienne. And if you would like to participate by keeping your mics on, if you don't have a noisy background, and ask questions throughout, or if you feel more comfortable, you can post them in the chat and I'll ask them to Adrienne. Okay, thank you. Without further ado, over to you, Adrienne.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming to my session today. My name is Adrienne, and my topic is applying graphic novels in the EFL classroom. Like Reese introduced, I've been working with incorporating more graphic novels into my students' classroom, conducting teacher trainings where I show teachers methods and techniques to promote the use of graphic novels in the classroom to help promote reader engagement and literacy development for our students. So as I present, feel free to ask questions anytime. Let's get started. Thanks, Reese. So our first question I want to talk about is, what are the challenges of reading? There are lots of challenges that my students face when I say, do you enjoy reading? It's sadly, for my heart, it's usually a big no. And a lot of that has to stem with, they feel like it's just too many words. When I show them a book, I'm like, oh, don't you want to read something? And it's just all words. They find it so intimidating. And even in their first language these days, they don't engage in a lot of reading, even in their first language. So when we ask them to read in English, there's 2 barriers that they need to overcome. I see some of you, I think, have similar reactions with your students. With the English, it's going to be difficult to choose a book that's at the right difficulty level. We want students to match their reading level, but also push them just a little bit. And a lot of that is trial and error until you find a right book that matches that student. They're going to have lots of different types of vocabulary that they're never seen before, and they're trying to encounter with this reading. And again, that's our challenge. That low student motivation. These days, almost everyone is a visual learner with gathering information. Think of how we get any type of news or announcements with videos and pictures and watching the news. We are used to consuming information in a visual manner. And texts, traditional novels, they lack that. So it's a completely different media form for getting that information. So that decreases that motivation, and anyone who's a visual learner is going to have a harder time with that. And let's be honest, it's just some ink on a page. It's not that visually pretty to look at for our students who aren't used to reading long text and long novels. So we have some challenges with our students. And I also got my chat loaded, Reese, so I'll also be going in there. I see Anika says, reading makes them tired. Yes, so many students, they pick up the book and then the eyes start falling. To be fair, I do the same thing when I'm tired and I'm trying to read. Sometimes it just makes my mind drift off. So we need to keep their attention so they're not falling asleep. We need to keep them motivated and help support their understanding of the text. It's a lot of challenges, but I think graphic novels can solve some of them. The next slide, Reese. So this wonderful addition, graphic novels, they are a lot less text. They still can have an advanced reading level, but with the decrease in the amount of text means it's going to be easier for them to process. It's more achievable for them to read and comprehend this less amount of text than a whole regular page in a traditional novel. When they see those new words and the new phrases and expressions, sometimes those pictures lend to the understanding, so they don't have to constantly look up, research what are these phrases, and it breaks the momentum of reading and getting immersed into the story. We balance both that visual and text in the graphic novels. If we think about it, we have our young learners read picture books, lots of beautiful colors, limited text, but that's usually for young learners. And then when our students get older, we give them this. That is a huge jump. That is a drastic jump in how we read. So graphic novels will combine the two, keep those images, but we're sophisticating that text, getting that maturity level up in the storylines, in the grammar, and the vocabulary. It's no longer for elementary kids and students, those young learners, but it can be more mature. This one I'm holding right now is The Great Gatsby. It's an excellent one. It still retains that F. Scott Fitzgerald writing style, but it lends those pictures to make it more digestible for our students. So because we're adding in those pictures, we're decreasing the amount of text. That means our students can focus on enjoying the story for reading. And that means that motivation is going to improve, it's going to increase, and hopefully make them less sleepy and more excited to open a book. I always say graphic novels are the bridge from the picture books to the traditional novels. I hope my students can enjoy traditional novels as much as I do, but I know a lot of them aren't ready yet. They're not there. They need that extra step along the way. And that's what these graphic novels can do. If they're not reading regular novels, even in their first language, we need to scaffold and add more steps to help encourage them to read regular traditional novels in English. And Brian says he's using the same graphic novel. Excellent. I hope I can give you some great recommendations today on graphic novels. Brian, can I ask, are you enjoying using the graphic novel?
I certainly am. My students have kind of some mixed responses, which I'd like to ask you about, later on in this presentation.
Sure. Hopefully I'll answer some. If not, then shoot the questions at me. Okay, then let's go to the next slide. So if you're interested in more in-depth research about the benefits of using graphic novels, I really encourage you to read Jean Yang's article, Graphic Novels in the Classroom. And that was kind of my entryway into this research. He approaches his article in a graphic novel form, as in he's done all this research, and why would he share that information in traditional text when he's promoting graphic novels? So he writes it in a graphic novel or comic format. The other one, if you're interested in more, is Scott McCloud's Understanding Comics. And this lends a lot of insight about why our graphic novels structure the way they are. And it helps understand some of the critical thinking that has to be applied to using graphic novels. A lot of times I see students and they just read the text as fast as they can, or just look at the pictures as fast as they can, turn the page. I got some great ideas in this book about ways to slow down my students, ways to get them to analyze the text and the pictures, and also try to look for what are we not seeing in the graphic novel, what is missing between the panels, and apply some critical thinking skills with that. And I've noticed it helps slow down the students so they can dive deeper in understanding more of the subtleties with the art and the meaning with the graphic novels. Any questions so far? All right, next slide, please. So I'm going to be focusing in now for use of graphic novels to help develop extensive reading skills in our English, our EFL learners. I've mostly done this for extensive reading, not intensive reading. So I really want to promote enjoyment in reading these graphic novels and less on grammar analysis taking place in the graphic novels. So that's where the rest of this presentation will head into that focus. Next, please. So I've already mentioned that I have The Great Gatsby as a graphic novel. And there are these days so many popular graphic novels that are adaptations of the traditional novels that we have read or have heard about our whole lives. And this is getting more and more popular because those traditional novels are getting older. So the language, we're noticing a gap in the English that was used 100 years ago versus the English that we use today. One of my favorite graphic novel adaptations to use is Anne of Green Gables. The story is so popular, but when we try to read the traditional novel of it, it can be extremely tiresome and challenging because of the evolution, the changing of English. Now, I still love the story and the characters are really wonderful. So I've shifted and started using the graphic novel. It retains the story, the feel, but it's updated the language so it's easier for my students to understand and digest. There are a lot of graphic novels these days that are new. They are not adaptations of traditional novels. And The New Kid won the Newbery Prize, I think it was last year or the year before, and it is an excellent reading resource. But I like to focus a lot of times on the traditional, the novel adaptations, because I can, if my students are more advanced, I can layer in and mix the graphic novel with the traditional text. And that way, if I have some advanced students, they can spend more time with the traditional text to get more in-depth reading process. And my lower level students can stay with the graphic novel. One of my coworkers did this with The Hobbit. She had a few really, in her advanced literature ESL class, they were reading The Hobbit, but she still had some students who that was too challenging for them. So she gave The Hobbit as a graphic novel, and they were still able to engage in the discussion, even though they were reading two different formats of the book. Okay, and Anika has a question. My students are really into webtoons. Are there any online graphic novels that are accessible? Webtoons are a great resource, and students are so into them these days. And I really am so thrilled to see that, because when I ask students, do they like reading? And they say no. And then I'm asked them, well, do you like webtoons? And they're like, yes. And that's reading. Are there words? Or is it telling a story? And some of them have that, oh, I'm a reader. It's just in a different format, something new to them. I haven't found that many graphic novels online. I think it has to do with a lot of the copyright and the publishers not opening them up for free just yet, but probably lesser famous stories and graphic novels would be accessible, hopefully online. But the books I've been able to find quite easily in Korea, Kyobo and Yes24 do sell a lot of them. and I've been able to access them and purchase all of my graphic novels in Korea. Any more questions so far? Then let's go to the next slide, Reese. So here are some of my recommendations for you. These are all novels that maybe you've heard of, maybe you've read: The Giver, To Kill a Mockingbird, The Golden Compass. I chose these books because there's the traditional novel and there's also the graphic novel adaptation of all of these. And a lot of these also have a movie or TV show. And so you can really combine all three different formats to try to engage and motivate the students. When I'm teaching books like Coraline or The Golden Compass, I often show them the movie version for about 10-15 minutes, just to get them over that barrier of the first chapter. The first chapter is going to be the most challenging for students to read because they have to learn, who are these characters? What are the relationships with each other? Where are they? What's the setting? Is there any background knowledge with the setting I need to know? What's the plot? Those are all the plot lines, but there's also then getting used to the writing style, getting used to the writer's vocabulary. And a lot of times that first chapter is heavy on descriptive text in the traditional novel. The first chapter is usually low on dialogue and a lot of descriptive text describing what they're seeing, who are the people. So when I'm doing To Kill a Mockingbird, we layer it. We do a little bit of research about the cultural setting of the book so they can understand. We watch certain scenes of the old movie, which is always interesting to see their reaction to the black and white movie. And then we enter with the graphic novel because it's going to be more focused on the dialogue with the images. And then we'll slowly look at some passages from the traditional novel. And in this way, I can layer all the different media formats of this story to try to keep my learners really engaged. So if you have young, lower level students, if your students are lower level, I would recommend Coraline, The City of Ember, Artemis Fowl, and A Wrinkle in Time. These are really great for my middle school students or my lower level high school students, even my adults who, my adult community students who are lower level, they really enjoyed reading Coraline. If your students are more advanced, The Giver, To Kill a Mockingbird, The Golden Compass, and well, both and stories have been really successful for all of these ones. So kind of choose based on your students' needs, and hopefully these recommendations will help you. Okay, I see some comments. Great, and there's a question here. Do I get any pushback about using graphic novels in class? About them not being educational? And yes and no. The most pushback I've gotten about the graphic novels has been when I'm doing teacher trainings, where I have teachers, especially I did a lot of Korean English teacher training, and they would come in and I would introduce graphic novels. And at first they would think, oh, comics? They're just silly. They're just for entertainment. There's not a lot of substance there. And, or I would hear, oh, it's only good with my students who can't read. It's not good for my students who are advanced, who need more academic text. And I acknowledge their concerns that, yep, this is maybe what you think, but these days there's been so much published in the form of graphic novels. And that's usually where I break out like The Great Gatsby or To Kill a Mockingbird. And I open a page, I'm like, just go ahead and read this a little bit for me. And I just kind of wait and they skim the text and they realize that it's actually at a very higher level than they expect. It's not Garfield cartoon comics that are going on, that it is the original words of the authors in the graphic novel. And we have a discussion about, why are your students doing extensive reading? What are the benefits of them? Can they do it and enjoy it? And we look at, I try to have in those teacher trainings lots of graphic novel examples. And so far, fingers crossed, I've been able to convince everyone that it's a great idea to use graphic novels. And it usually helps when there's some other teachers who latch on and think it's a fantastic idea. And then they start backing me up and I start getting that teacher support. So the naysayers have slowly been won over, but I needed to take time to explain the academic value, the language integrity of the graphic novels. And that helped by having a lot of the evidence. One of the best examples I showed is doing a performance-based assessment with the graphic novels, and how we can layer PBA with the reading of the graphic novels and all the stages that can go, because the teachers are desperate for some performance-based assessment ideas. And if it can combine it with literature, they really enjoyed that. And the students had success with that as well. Teachers did it with Anne of Green Gables and City of Ember, and it was very successful for them. So far, people are enjoying the graphic novels. Hasn't been too many people arguing with me about it, but that's a really good question. I was prepared to fight my fight, but I convinced them. Any other questions so far? Okay, let's continue. So I've talked a lot about all the benefits and the beautiful things about graphic novels, but I want to share some of it with you. So I'm going to do a little bit of a reading of a graphic novel for you. Go ahead and do the next slide. But before I do the reading for you, I'm going to explain the way I do it. I combine that first chapter with a read aloud and a think aloud. Read aloud, just me, the teacher, reading it out to the students. So that way it releases some of that burden of, especially chapter 1, the dreaded first chapter. I read it to them so they can just kind of relax a little bit and process it. But I also do a think aloud to help model that metacognitive, critical thinking ideas that I've gotten from understanding comics, to help them realize what clues and details are hidden or layered in these graphic novels. So I want to encourage that slower process of digesting the graphic novels. Also, by showing my thinking process as I read, it helps them prepare when I say, okay, now it's your turn. Builds them for that independence and helps them understand where to get that information. And of course, my lower level students, I always want to encourage them. And if, again, I model first, it really helps them when they have to read chapter 2 by themselves. So I'm going to be modeling some of these think aloud and read aloud strategies. And next slide, please. We're going to be looking at chapter 1 of the City of Ember. Just quickly, is anyone familiar with the City of Ember? I'm getting lots of heads no. Perfect, because I want to give you something new and then hopefully something you can take back with your students. So again, this one is more for middle school or lower level students I've had success with, and even elementary higher level students have worked with this one, just more guidance. Okay, so we have The City of Ember, the graphic novel by Jean Duprat, adapted by Dallas Midrup, and art by Nicholas Asker. Next slide, please. Okay. It is written in the book of the City of Ember. The Ember was made long ago by the builders. Beyond Ember, the darkness goes on forever in all directions. Wow. Do you see the city? It's kind of small and it really is dark all around it. I wonder what type of place this is that there's no light outside of the city. Ember has existed for 241 years. There is no place but Ember. It is the only light in the dark world. I wonder what type of world they're living in. Okay, we're getting closer into Ember. We see a clock tower. And on the bottom panel, we're going in closer, zooming in. Ember School. Okay, so the story is probably about students, some students at the school. Next page. Chapter 1, Assignment Day. I wonder what Assignment Day means. Okay, so we see the class zooming in more, zooming in more. It's almost like a movie, the slow zoom in. And we see a girl playing with her hair. Okay. A boy with a scowling face. I bet these are our main characters for the story. Young people of the highest class, greetings, another year. The chalkboard says, welcome Mayor Cole. This must be the mayor because he has the nice jacket on. Assignment day now, isn't it? Yes. Job you draw today is for 3 years. So assignment day, career day, getting your job for 3 years. The girl looks very worried. So let us begin. Who cares to be first? Lizzie. So maybe her best friend taking the first one. I would like to be first. Okay, let's see what type of jobs they have. What's next? Oh, wow, it's really random. Look, her hand is just digging in a bag for a job. Whew, okay, random jobs. Read it out loud. Supply depot clerk. Very good, a vital job. Next. Our girl, our main character girl, she's standing up. She picks it. Out loud, please. Pipe works laborer. So wet and cold, dangerous. Okay, sounds like she did not get a good job. A dangerous job. I wonder what pipe works is. Next, students, building repair assistant, doctor's assistant, greenhouse helper, electrician's helper. Okay, assistant helper seems like it's just like entry level learning on the job. Next, our serious boy is standing up. He reaches in, grabs it. Messenger. He looks very upset and angry about his job. I wonder why. Let's see what's next. And then he throws it on the ground. All right, he's really angry. Bad behavior. Go to your seat immediately. Students should be glad to work for their city. Ember will prosper if all citizens do their best. The boy is very angry now, yelling, but Ember is not prospering. Silence. The lights go out all the time now, and there are shortages of everything. If no one does anything about something, terrible is going to happen. So we've learned this is the problem of Ember. Low shortages, power going out, and in the city, all darkness around. That can be very scary. Miss Thorne, who might this young man be? I'm Dune Harrow. I'll remember you. I think we found our villain of the story with that statement. Congratulations to all. Welcome to Ember's workforce. Poor you. I thought I picked the bad one, but you got the worst. School's out. This is where I want to be, up here where everything happens, not down underground. Oh, she's so sad. And our last page. Lena, will you trade with me? He's really pleading. So, will you trade? Yes, messenger is the job I want most. Now she looks happy. Well, it seems like it's not too serious. They could just exchange pieces of paper for their job. All right, everyone, that is chapter 1 of the City of Ember. I hope you enjoyed the read aloud and the think aloud to help get my students to process that extra details, find out more key information about the plot. Any questions about the read aloud or think aloud or anything so far? I liked how someone was saying it's a Mad Max world. I would love that to see that coming in. And a great way to develop visual literacy. Absolutely. There's a lot of information layered in here, the words and the images, and some critical thinking that you actually don't get in traditional novels. It's critical thinking in a different way, and it works their brains and analyzes the text a different style. Wonderful. All right, let's go on to the next slide. So as you listened, what were some of the differences you experienced? Think about when you read a regular traditional novel versus the graphic novel, what were some differences you experienced? Would anyone like to share?
Well, for me, I think the major appeal and what I felt when I was kind of immersed in that world was kind of the atmosphere of the place and the atmosphere of the classroom, the atmosphere of the school. Through the visuals, especially the color, that stood out to me. That was a big difference for me, like that visual language of the story.
Excellent. Thank you, Reese. Anika, did you want to add something?
Oh, no, I was just gonna say something similar to Reese. Like, it was nice to see the actual world.
Yeah, a lot of the students, they really clue in on that the colors give so much emotion. And so they can feel a more emotional connection through the colors. And later with Ember, we would discuss that how their clothes are all kind of the same dull color. And it's so dark in the book, and it kind of conveys that aesthetic of it's a very dark place and they're struggling a lot. Great. How did the graphic novel support your comprehension?
I've been using a graphic novel this semester in one of the courses that I teach. And what I found, and this is something that I need to check in with my students about and develop my own understanding of, but I suspect that a lot of them, some of the pictures that we looked at, there were no words. And I have this feeling that my students' eyes kind of pass over those very quickly. But in the pages that we looked at, some of those non-worded pictures are actually, they're containing very key ideas about who these people are, and perhaps even, some of the so what's not being said is sometimes just as important as what is being said.
Absolutely. Thank you, Brian. And with my students, if I felt like they're kind of passing those, then when we do our reading in class, I would hand out a little worksheet and I would ask them to analyze those key panels. And that would just be, again, that time to get them to slow down and try to deduce that information in those wordless panels and try to start training them to analyze a bit more and not just speed read. Great.
I was
And
also,
then,
oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Kind of in that vein, it jumped out to me that this seems very pared down from like a traditional page of text. And I could see that being really welcome to some of my students. Like, a chapter book can be very intimidating, so many words. And here, the same level of stories being told, the same complexity, but it seems more accessible because there's just so fewer words to get through. And I could see that being very great for reluctant readers.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's so difficult, especially those first chapters that are just so descriptive, and they're writing the dark lights, the brown colors, the scowling face, but instead we just get to look at it and then move on to the plot words. So the reading's all connected to the characters' voices and the plot, and it takes away that heavy descriptions that a lot of times our students struggle with reading. And my last question, would the graphic novels help your students engage with reading?
Yeah, I think so, because I mentioned in the comics, my students like love webtoons. Like they're all about that. And I think if they just saw that, you know, it doesn't a graphic novel is just a webtoon by another name, like they'd probably be more open to it, and I probably wouldn't hear the comment, teacher, reading makes me tired.
Absolutely. And I like that you mentioned their webtoons, because we can validate that what they're reading is reading. And it is worthwhile to enjoy stories through words and pictures. And it's just a printed webtoon if we present it to our students like that. And it could really validate their own reading and encourage them to enjoy this type of reading as well. Thank you, everyone, for your insight. I appreciate it. All right, so I have one last thing I want to talk about. The next slide, Reese. And a way to keep my students actively engaged with reading is I do reading logs, but instead of just summarizing in a little journal, I approach it trying to connect it in ways that my students are more familiar with. So the next slide. One of the most successful ones I've had is by having character Instagrams. Now, I don't use the technology. I print these out, or if we're doing online classes, I send them a Google Slides doc of this template. And the purpose of this is after they read a chapter, they choose one of the characters. And if that character had Instagram, well, how would they post describing their day's experience? How would they post in a reaction to what happened in that chapter? And the students have really enjoyed this because they love Instagram, they love social media, and I don't need to explain what to do or how to do it that much. They immediately know what is expected of them. So here's an example from the City of Ember. They made theirs Adventure Girl because she wants to go out and experience the world. Her post is danger. I got my job today, pipeworks labor. People say it's dangerous. Oh no. Hashtag assignment day, Mayor Cole. And they can add their friend's response, Lizzie, good luck and be safe. And they really enjoy this. And sometimes they post them up on the room. Students write their own comments to the post, or they get heart stickers and like the post. And each chapter, I encourage them to explore a different character. They really enjoy it when I have them choose the villain and have the villain post. So my favorite one from City of Ember is they choose Mayor Cole, and they're like, oh, annoying kids. I'm so glad I never had any. And so just to get an inside view of the characters, they really have enjoyed this activity. And you can just Google Instagram template, and there's tons of them available. The next one, there's 3 activities. If I have just a few minutes and I want to squeeze in one reading log, we focus just on hashtags. So this is for Coraline. And here, again, they're identifying what are the key elements in the story. What were the key plot points, and how can they express it in just a few words? Now, it's a short writing, so my students who struggle with writing feel more engaged with this, but it's actually quite an intense comprehension check because they have to really identify what are the key points in that chapter. How are they summarizing that in just a few words? So it's short on writing, but high in comprehension checks. And this one is, they love writing all the hashtags, and it's quite simple and they know how to do it. And the last one, is a playlist. They choose the character and they imagine that character goes home. They want to put on some music. What is that character going to listen to? And it's connecting their own personal taste in music to that character. I say English songs, Korean songs, classical songs, any type of music. What are they listening to? So here's Anne of Green Gables, Love Story by Taylor Swift, because she loves romance and love stories and wants her own true love one day, but she has red hair. And if my students are more advanced writing, I have them write the reason a bit longer. If they don't, that's okay. So these are 3 types of reading logs that I use with my students to keep them engaged in interacting with the text. Great. Any questions about the reading logs? All right, then we'll head to the next slide, Brian.
Sorry, Adrienne, I just had a question about the playlists. How do you have students share this with one another?
Great.
I'm curious.
If we have time, and they are allowed to use their phones in class, then I have them get in there, actually play like 30 seconds of the song, and then they can explain it in small groups. But sometimes we can't have that. And other times, if we're in an online class, I use a Padlet and I have them write a Padlet post. So this is Anne, this would be Gilbert, this is Matthew, Marilla, and all the different characters. And then they post on Padlet based off of the different characters.
Oh, great. Thank you.
They love it the best when they can actually play the songs.
Right.
But I tell them, I'm like 30 seconds, only 30 seconds.
Try and keep it short. I think Jeanette has a question, similar question about the hashtags. How do you have them share?
Great. So if we're in an online class, I just have them send the hashtags in the chat. So we can have a big running list of hashtags. If we're in class, I like to use sticky notes and have them post them on the wall. And then if I still have a little bit of time, we do some grouping, which hashtags are similar, and we kind of plot them out to see, were we able to identify the main ideas? So it depends on in person or online and how much time I have with the activity.
Thank you.
Great. Any other questions? All right, well, I do see the time. I know we're just about out. So I think my last slide is my list of references. If you want to do any more research or where I got some ideas for these activities, I was doing research in project-based learning and performance-based assessment. That was kind of the brainchild, and then it kind of grew from there. And the graphic novel resources I mentioned, like Understanding Comics and Jean Yang's article. All right, and then my last slide.
Sorry, I have a quick question. Your one reference there is about hacking project-based learning. I'm a bit curious how that relates to what you've spoken about.
Yes, so that comes in some of the ideas about the reading logs. And I was reading this book about ways, these types of tasks and interactions with project-based learning. And it kind of got me thinking about how can I get the students reflecting on what they're reading? And it kind of sparked my ideas for some of the reading log ideas. Yep. Great. So here's my email address, asol.english@gmail.com. Please feel free to email me if you would like to bounce some ideas off of each other, looking for book recommendations. I am here. I think teachers sharing resources is how we all grow and become better teachers. So thank you so much. Any
Adrienne,
last questions?
I have one question that I'd like to ask. I'm also using The Great Gatsby, and some of my Korean students have been finding that the visual style is very different from the Korean styles of animation, to the point where they were having troubles differentiating the male characters. They would take a look at, if you're familiar, Nick and Gatsby and say, I can't tell these apart. And I've spent a lot of my adult life in Korea, so I'm looking at them going, I can see where that comes. I have no problem deciphering it, but my students are having a hard time with that. Have you run into that? And if so, what pointers can you provide?
Sure. The art style varies greatly amongst the books. And I agree that Gatsby definitely has a very unique style. And this is where I focus in that these graphic novels, it's art style, it's artwork in these graphic novels. And each artist has a different way of expressing information. So even though it is different from the traditional Korean style of comics, that we need to acknowledge it as more artwork. And when I present it more that way, they slowly start agreeing. But yes, in this book, especially, those two characters do look very similar in their structure. The other graphic novels hasn't been that much. I also briefly explained that sometimes their faces are vague because they want the readers to find more of a physical connection with the characters. The more finely they're drawn, the less we can feel connected to the characters. The more open, the more we can try to see ourselves in them. And that's discussed in this book here about why the art style is that way.
I had a question about access to the graphic novels that you've mentioned. Are they pretty easy to find here in Korea, or did you have to like order them online, or could you just find them in the bookstores?
I ordered them all online. I used Kyobo, Yes24, and Aladdin. And sometimes the prices change on them, but for the most part, each graphic novel was usually about 10,000 won. Some of them are more expensive because they're newer releases. I think Coraline and City of Ember are some of the cheaper ones, but pretty accessible on websites to order them.
One of my co-workers has, I was talking with him about graphic novels after I decided to try it this semester. I mentioned it to one of my coworkers who last year was using 1984 as a resource, Orwell's 1984, as a resource in one of his classes, and find that half of his students had just been left in the dust because they couldn't keep up with the reading. And he found a graphic novel and is now using that this semester. I've talked with one of his students just who I happened to meet in the hall, and they're like, it's so much better. So, at the university level, for some of these academic classes, we're finding that graphic novels have a definite place in extensive reading, or, in my co-worker's case, he's using the course that he's teaching is about information technology and surveillance and that sort of thing. So 1984 is a definite resource directly connected to the theme of the course, and his students are finding it much, much, much more accessible.
That's wonderful. And also, I know some of my friends who are teachers back in America, they've started to use graphic novel adaptations, especially when it comes to reading some of the Shakespeare plays. Instead of just the play script, they're reading a graphic novel of it, and they're having more success using them, and even in the States with our native speakers.
I actually did something very similar last year with my freshmen. We previewed the play with a graphic novel, like they read it over their break, and then it was way more effective than having them watch a film or just reading like the lit chart summary on the internet, which they'll do anyway. Oh, okay, you can actually imagine what these characters are doing. Especially with Shakespeare, that was great to have the help.
I like how you said that it was more successful than just a movie. In Yang's article, one of the best points about the graphic novels is that because it is physical, it is a book, the students can control their pace and control the speed that they read and digest the information. Whereas movies, it's great visual, but if you don't keep up, you have to rewind and then go and then rewind. But the students have more control of the pacing with the graphic novels, with the visual nature.
All right, sorry to jump in. We've run out of time. I'd like to thank Adrienne for all those wonderful ideas and insights. And please unmute and give her a round of applause for that excellent presentation. Thank you so much. I learned a lot myself. And I would like to invite everyone to continue this discussion on Discord if you like. And if you didn't get the very smooth reference I made to the Easter egg, I'll be very kind and put it in the chat again. So thank you, Adrienne, and I'll stop the recording here. Thank you.
Thank you.